One of the hardest things about being a new writer is getting to the end of your project, crossing the finish line. And today I'm very happy to welcome Emma Dhesi to discuss getting to the finish line. So, Emma Dhesi is a book coach who specializes in helping beginner authors write their first novel. Emma helps you improve your craft, provides feedback on your written work, and navigates you through the emotional roller coaster of finishing a novel. For more hands off help, Emma hosts a Facebook group and podcast, both called Turning Readers into Writers. Those links will be in the show notes for today. I am really happy to welcome Emma Dhesi to the program. One. I want to welcome Emma Dhesi to my program on Writing Pursuits. Welcome from Houston to where are you?
I'm in Edinburgh in Scotland, so other side of the pond.
So if we have a little bit of difficulty in translation, we'll just have to work it out. Two people divided by a common language.
That's it. It's so funny, isn't it?
It is. It is really wild. And I can always tell when I am editing someone from Canada that, because they're using all the British spellings. And it's like, oh, and then there are certain expressions that are very unusual here in, the South of the US. And I'm like, where did that come from? Oh, I see that. Oh, maybe that's just a colloquialism, I'll have to ask. So what is your story, Emma?
Oh, my story. My story is like a lot of people always wanted to be a writer. Uh, was an avid reader from a child, wrote stories as I started with children's stories, middle grade, teen, and so on and so forth as I grew up. Life got in the way. I ended up going to university and
Mhm.
then moving to London, and social life beckoned. And sort of in my teens and my early 20s, the idea of sitting in a room by myself with made up people was less alluring than going out with friends and going to the theatre and things. So it sort of went by the wayside for quite a while. But then I would always come back to it. There'd be waves, and I'd think, no, this is something I want to do. And I'd go and sign up for another class and get really excited whilst I was in the class and start a new project. And then about a week after that class finished, my energy would kind of, and my enthusiasm would wane as well. And so I never quite got to the finish line with anything. And it was something I always felt very guilty about, never getting to the finish line. How could I
Right.
possibly expect to be a writer if I couldn't finish anything? And then I got to 40 and I was still having the same discussions with myself. And there was a sort of switch though that went off, and I just said to myself, okay, you either do this or you don't. Make up your mind. If you want to do this, you write a first draft from beginning to end. And if you like writing it and it was good fun, fantastic. Then you can go on and start revising. If you get to the end of that first draft and you realize it was just a horrific experience, you hated every moment of it, then and you can put that dream to bed and move on and stop feeling guilty and start something else. So yeah, just the switch in me. I think I'd hit a brick wall. I was fed up going around in circles and decided, right, let's do it. And so then I did write that first draft. It took me a long time, but I got there in the end, and I loved the experience, and I loved the
Right.
challenge of it as well.
Right.
It was a puzzle I enjoyed figuring out and putting together. Um, and so yeah, started revisions and did that for another few years, and then ultimately published my first book, which, as you'll know, is just an amazing feeling to see it there and
Hold
think,
it in your
wow,
hands.
I did that. I
Right.
created something out of nothing. And there it is.
That sounds remarkably like my story. I went to work and had kids and was very, very busy, a very, very busy life. And when I became a teacher late, um, I was like reading the books in the library that because I was a reading teacher and
Mhm.
that inspired me. And I also read to my children all the time they were growing up. So like there I am, the end with my son, who was the last child, and we were reading John Flanagan, and I go, I love this book. I love these books. It was a series. And I said, I'd like to write this. And so I just started with the spiral and started writing. And much like you, it was like I had put things up, brought them back out, put things up, brought them back out. And finally, it was just like, I need to just see if I can get to the end. And about the time I got to the end of the fourth one, I decided, no, I need to go back to the beginning and do a revision and actually get serious about it. So
Oh, that's so interesting. So you wrote 4 kind of first drafts of 4 novels.
no, it was four novels, and I realized I've got a series here. I just have to start writing it. And so it was much easier to write it the second time because I knew I could. I proved to myself that I could write, So
But I think it sounds like you did it in a really a great way, because then you're having your apprenticeship there, and you're discovering that you enjoy writing series as well, and so you get to do all those hours of practice, and then get to go back and revise it again and work on it and sort of perfect it. So it's probably a good way of doing it. I admire your patience as well to kind of to do that.
Just because there's a lot of kids around and there's a busy life, and I could write in the spiral or the 3-ring notebook, doctor's appointments and soccer games and whatever else it wasn't hard to do. And I always had it with me. I was deathly afraid of losing them because it was handwritten. But I think you're right. I think there's a certain amount of apprenticeship that goes on, like tens of thousands of words. And once you've done that, you can write. So it helps. It does help. It's not necessary. Absolutely. I mean, you can't just start at the beginning and just start writing on a computer and go.
But then you still, I do believe you still then have to do your apprenticeship. That even if you write your first book and publish it, by the time you get to your 4th book, you're going to look back, even as I do now, look back and go, oh my goodness, I can see
there's
how
some things
far
I
I've
wish I
come.
could change. Yes, there are definitely some things I wish I could change. Absolutely. So, but what do you think are the biggest roadblocks, the biggest obstacles to finishing that first book?
To the actual finishing of it.
To reaching the
There's a couple
finish
of
line.
things. If I think about the practical side of it, the actual kind of story craft, then I think it comes back to character and not knowing your character very well, and not really understanding why you're writing about them and why they've come to you and what it is that they're trying to share with the world. We might have a sort of a superficial idea of who this character is and what they want and the adventure that they're going on, and we have a sense of the plot of the story, but we don't have a deeper understanding of the story, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
And I think that's certainly 100% where I've gone wrong in the past, is just having this lovely idea and going with it, and it's all hunky-dory and great, but then you hit a point where you don't really know why you're writing this now and how it's going to come together, and you get a bit bored with it as well. That can be another thing, because you've not done all of this backstage work that needs to be done around the character, or you don't know that you've got to go back and do it. That's the other thing as well. When I think about the majority of the craft books out there, they do talk fairly superficially about, you've got to what does your character want, what does your character need, what is their flaw, and those things are important. I'm not saying that they're not, but they don't. The books and what we learn doesn't really kind of go into that in much depth, so we're not really understanding, well, what was happening in our character's life before this story happened, what has brought them to this point, so where the story starts, and why does it start on that day, because that's going to be a big key clue as well as to why the story is important. Why does it have to start on this day at this moment in this place?
Perfect.
And
Yes.
yeah, only by going back and really understanding what's led the life experiences of this character up until this point, that we know what that flaw is, we know what they need, we know what they want, but we have
Mhm.
to do that work at the beginning. Now, I think that if you're lucky and your brain is wired that way, that you have the ability to do this all up front before you even start writing, and you figure it all out and it's great and you know where you're going, I would suggest,
Wouldn't that be nice?
yes, I know. But I think for most of us, particularly if you're writing your first novel,
Mhm.
this is something that you need to come back to do in revision. So I think often we need to get to know the story a little bit, get a more of a feel for it ourselves, and get to know the characters a little bit on this more superficial level
Mhm.
before we can then go back and develop their history and their experiences and why they are the way they are. Um,
Right.
so that's one of the things, I on a sort of craft level, I think that's one of the things that stops people from finishing.
Right. I I did have that same exact experience where I created a character who she was the main character, and then I found out that, oh, she was just not that likable. And then I had to create a way for the reader to connect with her at least at the beginning, because she had a little bit of a hard shell, and she
Hmm.
was supposed to be that way, but it made
Hmm.
her completely like, "Ah, why would I wanna read about this person?" You know? And
And when
I
you went back and did that kind of uh, sort of history work on your character, did it open up some things and you understood her more?
absolutely. What I am so thankful I did this one thing. I did an actual interview with my character. I didn't write it down. I put down the pen and paper, and I went completely recorded. So I recorded an out interview with her. So I asked her all these questions, and I mean, that was like a switch in my brain. I I don't know what it is about putting down and just becoming the character.
Hmm.
Then she told me all this stuff, and I was like, "Oh, oh," and I understood her so much better. And then on the revision, I was
Hmm.
able to make her much better and communicate not the backstory, but
Hmm.
to slip things in to kind of give the reader a connection.
Yeah. And context, yeah, for
Mhm.
why they're doing what they're doing. And
Yes.
that's a wonderful, I've never done it that way, to actually record the interview. Might feel did it feel a bit schizophrenic as you
A little.
went from
I'm not
person to
gonna lie.
person?
And what was funny is my creative brain was like, "Oh, I've gotta come up with an answer for that. And what would she say?" Oh, she would tell me that, and yeah, so yes, a little bit of a little bit of a mind bender, but it
Mm,
worked and it was so helpful. And I'm
yeah,
sure people can do that on a piece of paper as well. It
yeah.
just seemed like I needed to put it away and do something completely different to trigger a
Mm-hmm.
different part of my brain. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think you're right about you don't know your character well enough, especially on that first book. And as you write more, you realize, oh, I've got to know that.
Mm-hmm.
Your second and third and fourth book, you know that you need to know those things.
Yes. So do you mean like oh, I see. So you as the creator, by the third and fourth book, you needed to know that stuff that was there in the first when you
Yeah,
did
well,
that.
no, but before you there, I'm even talking about standalone. When you go with a new character, you know that you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of that experience has helped you. Is what I was
Yeah.
saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So even
So,
if you're not necessarily going to put that on the page, you as the creator, you need to know the backstory. You need to know the
hmm
nuances behind it.
and
It
I think,
reminds me of,
yeah.
yeah, it reminds me when I used to act, and we would, would be told, go off and do your research and development. You go and kind of do all the work behind the scenes about it, about this character. And then I remember one director kind of saying to us, okay, so now you've got that, now you throw it all away. You just throw it all away, with the idea being that now this is just embodied in us. We just get
Okay.
to we know it in our body and in our memory, from the work that we've done around our character. We're not going to bring that on stage and demonstrate it in any physical way or say it in our dialogue, but just knowing that will come out in the way that we move on stage or the way that we say something. And I think that's the same in our fiction, how our characters move and the things that they say come out of us having done that research into their past and who they are. And then
That's fascinating.
and I think then that feeds into the plot, that feeds into the decisions that the character will make, which then feeds into the plot. And so that can help get us unstuck with
So you've read the script.
Yes, you read the script. And so one that comes to mind would be, we were doing what was it now? The Importance of Being Earnest.
Okay.
By Noel Coward. And so we took a trip to the Ritz in London and we had a tour around
neat.
it, and just getting into what it would be like to be in that period and to come from money and be of that time. And so that was a really fun way of doing it as well. And you'd watch the movies, you'd read about that kind of period of time, but then you have to embody this one individual who's just flesh and blood like everybody else, but we know that we've experienced this in the background, and so almost like muscle memory, I suppose, it would then translate into the performance. And
I would
so
think that acting experience would help you so much with characterization in your writing.
I think it does, yes. And I think it helps me with dialogue
Yes.
as well, and just a sense of pacing as well. As you're working through 3 acts, then it can be helpful there. But definitely it taught me a lot about putting yourself in the shoes of another individual who's not real, but bringing them to life. Yeah.
Fascinating. So what other things do you think hold beginner writers back from finishing a book?
The other thing I've noticed is the biggest thing. It's got nothing to do with craft at all, but it's just what's going on inside the individual, inside the person. So they are the biggest. And that phrase, get out of your own way. So there's a lot of fear around finishing. Fear that, the most obvious one being fear that it's not going to be good enough. And then the fear of, there's also bizarrely, and I've never experienced this one, the fear of success. Like, what happens if this is really good? What happens if people start reading it and people start reviewing it? Because I think we often have a fear of readers, don't we? We desperately
Absolutely.
want them.
We're afraid of those people. They're going to read our book and judge us.
Yes, absolutely. So that fear of it being out in the world and letting go of it. And I still hear people talk about their books, as their babies, because many of the people I work with, they've been writing the same book for 10, 15, 20 years. So they are, very emotionally attached to this story. And so this fear of that someone else will read it and judge it, that fear of just letting go of something that has been part of their life for so long, that can be very scary as well. And then I was talking to a student the other week, and he's coming towards the end of the first draft of his story, and this is a story that he's been wanting to write for a long time. And he was saying that, I'm a bit scared. I've been avoiding writing the end because there's this perhaps a slight feeling of anticlimax around it, because he's been striving towards it for so long, and then, oh, okay, now it's done, and then you've got to go back and revise it and continue working on it. The sort of the romantic idea that you type the end, pull the paper out of the typewriter, and off it goes to the publisher. Actually, there's a lot of work still to do. So sometimes there's a little bit of that as well.
So what do you advise somebody who is so attached to their work that they're kind of afraid to reach that point where it's time to let it go?
I would recommend just taking a little bit of time away from it then. That this is and kind of bracing yourself, doing a little bit of self-talk to
Mm-hmm.
know that, okay, this is going to be a farewell. You could even do a little kind of, I don't want to say the word ceremony around it, but just having a celebration that you've got to this point, acknowledging it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Another student of mine she just finished her first draft, and she got to the end, and we were like, wow, we took a moment just to acknowledge the achievement that she'd made, because she's in what, the top 5% of people.
Right.
She's finished it.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a moment for her to kind of acknowledge and take a moment to realize, okay, now I get to move into the next step of this. I get to take a step further towards this goal, this dream that I've held for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And that will come slower for some people and quicker for others. But just that giving yourself a bit of space to start disconnecting from it and start to see this now as
Right.
more of an asset, as more of a product, of more as a tool, a product or an asset that is going to go out into the world. Not just yet, we've still got work to do, but I think if you can begin that process, give yourself time to lead into that, it'll make the parting a little less painful when it comes.
I think the letting things cool or rest is a really great idea, especially for that first time. You need to have a little space between you, and especially the first draft. You just need to
Mhm.
kind of, so in that space, maybe it would be wise, or maybe for some people it would be okay to think about, well, what is going to come after that? What am I going to write next? So you kind of give yourself something to look forward to after you're done shipping the product, and then go
Yeah.
back and you've got the time and space then to look at your first draft, especially with fresh eyes,
Mhm.
because you know how much it's going to change.
Yeah. Yes. It's so true. And you might surprise yourself and find that by the time you've done 13 rounds of revisions, you are over this book. You never want to
Oh,
see it again. You're just fed up with it.
what are some techniques you recommend to help people break through and get past themselves and the writing itself, even to get to the end, and then they can go back, before they can go back and do their revisions?
Hmm. So if you find that you're getting stuck,
Hmm.
um, do go back and do those character histories and go and look back at them, and that will open up things for you, definitely. But on a practical, sort of step by step, it's just remembering to take things one moment at a time. So we're talking about just getting to the end of that first draft. So acknowledging it's going to be messy.
Hmm.
There's going to be a lot of work to do, no matter how much planning you've done ahead of time, because as you and I both know, things change as you write the book. So take the pressure off this being perfect. It's never going to be like one of the books you've got on your shelf that's been published. And just take it little by little and scene by scene. I would even go down to say, scene by scene. So if you have, say, 2 or 3 scenes in a chapter, just break that right down to the scene level and what needs to happen in this one scene. Thinking about how that's going to just push the storyline forward, or even just the plot line forward for now. How is it going to
Absolutely.
push the plot forward? And so each scene needs to serve a function. And as long as you know why you're including that scene, and what if we're thinking about, 3-story method, for example, which I know you're a big fan of,
Right.
what's the consequence of that scene? So understanding that cause and effect trajectory when you're in those sticky moments, getting, say, that that last third of the book, um, even if you can't yet figure out how you're going to pull all those strands together, just keep moving scene by scene and have a decision made at the end of each scene so that you know how you're going to move on to the next one. I think that's a really great way, particularly in that first draft, and you
Hmm.
haven't planned out your scenes ahead of time. If, as long as your character whichever character is in the scene doesn't need to be your protagonist, but the point of view character in that scene, as long as they make a decision about something, either to do something or to say something to somebody, then
Hmm.
that gives you your impetus for the next scene.
Right.
And by focusing on that next scene, that gives you the impetus to move on to the next one. And so, kind of organically, almost, it starts to
Hmm.
happen as the story. Uh, when you hear writers kind of say, the story almost wrote itself. It was so amazing. I felt like I was just dictating this. I think that's what they're referring to, that they are taking it scene by scene. And as long as they know that their character is making a decision about something at the end, that automatically leads on to the next scene. And then there is that feeling of not what am I trying to say? It just feels easier, I
Hmm.
think, then takes the pressure off.
I think as long as you're willing to let your if you stop doing the red light green light thing where oh that won't work, oh that won't work, oh that won't work, just give yourself the green light to just write whatever, be as messy and as illogical as you need to be just to get to the next scene.
Hmm.
Just do it, and then you can come back and go, oh I see a way to fix that. Oh that really actually that works really well, or that doesn't work.
Hmm.
And I need to think of something else, but I know I need to get to this place, so you rewrite a scene,
Hmm.
but at least you got there. And so yeah.
And even just putting in like the skeleton of a scene, I think it's Steph Green who talks about her skeleton method.
Hmm.
She just has the very, very basics of what she wants to happen in a scene, but it allows her to keep moving forward to the end of that very first, very messy draft,
Hmm.
knowing that she can come back with it. But I think of my own experiences. Normally, I'm a very linear writer, so I
Hmm.
start at the beginning and I work my way through to the end. But I remember, I think it was my second book, I think it was. I was flowing along fine to that halfway point, and then I got really stuck, and I
Oh
didn't know
no.
what was going to come next. But I knew how I wanted the book to end, so I just skipped to the end, and then I wrote the chapters back to the middle, and then joined them in the middle. No idea why that worked for that book, but that's how I got around it, and that's how I managed to get that flow to come back into my writing. And I think that's something else actually, just to remember that you don't have to write the first scene, then the next, then the next. Some
Amen.
people, yeah, well, because like some people like to write in a sort of patchwork form, or they do
Hmm.
a bit here and a bit there as the scene comes to them, trusting that there is method in it and it will all pull together at the end.
I forget who said this too. She said as she's writing, if she realizes that she needs, just for instance, an evil twin, but the evil twin hasn't been there since the beginning, that and I really wish I could remember who it was that said it. Then they'll just start writing the evil twin. They'll kind of put a bracket, hey, this is where I started with that. And I've got to go back, and now I've got to, but they don't stop and go back. They just go
Mhm.
forward with what they need from
That
there
is
on.
such a good point. Yes. I think a
Mhm.
lot of writers, yeah, would be tempted to go think, oh my goodness, I've got to go back to the beginning now and start all
Uh,
over again. So
you
what,
already
yeah,
know
I
you're going to have
completely.
to go back to the beginning and start all over again. Just keep going. But
Mhm.
she would just say, just put it in a bracket or something and make a note and know that you're going to have to fix that. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's you just write your list of fixes that you're going to make.
Yes. Yeah. And it's harder, I think, when you're writing your first book, particularly, it's harder to kind of trust that you will be able to come back and do that because you've not yet got that evidence in your own brain that, oh, I've
Mhm.
been here before, I've had this challenge before, and I got over it last time, I fixed it last time, so I know that I can do the same again this time. So there's a little bit of that comes, I think, with just with the practice and going through that apprenticeship that we've talked about.
Mhm.
And who was it that said, I think it's Nina Amir, she said, you've got to practice finishing. That's just as important, if not more important, than practicing starting a book, where you've got
I
to
agree.
practice finishing books.
I agree. And getting to the end of a first draft is is part of that. Absolutely part of that. And then you go through the revision and you get to the end again. And even if you have to go back again, you've managed to get to the end. Sometimes I counsel people to just start a very short story so they can get to the end. Write a short story so that you've got that experience of landing the story, and then make it longer and hit the end again. But I agree with you. I think you need to practice getting to the end. So that's very good. What other tricks do you have up your sleeve? You've done some really great ones. Certainly.
So one of the tools that I have been using recently, and again, I use this in revision, but you could use it. It's encouraged that you use it when you're first drafting, but it's not what I like. And this actually comes from Jenny Nash. So this is her inside outline, and she encourages us to have, there's 2 bullet points for each scene. One is what happens, the plots, what happens in the plot, and then the other one is what she calls the point. And the purpose of that is to outline for yourself, okay, what is the emotional driver in this scene? What is the story element of this scene as opposed to the plot element? And this is a great way for you to be able to recognize the cause and effect. Again, it comes to that. So you're understanding, okay, this happened in scene A, which leads on to this happening in scene B, which leads on to this happening in scene C. But if they felt like this in scene A, and then this happened, how are they going to feel in scene B? And then how are they going to feel in scene C? And all the time it's taking them forwards to that arc, towards that arc that they're going to reach by the end of the novel. Bearing in mind there'll be those steps backwards, steps forwards as they struggle with what it is that they're trying to overcome. But I've certainly found this, I'm a big proponent of it now, of using this inside outline.
It's kind of like an external story in the internal story.
Exactly, yes. And how they mirror one another.
Right. They affect one another.
Yeah.
Wow, that's actually a really great way. And almost certainly you would hit the 3-story thing where you had the conflict, the choice, and the consequence. Almost certainly just having those 2 points, because what's happening externally, what does it mean internally? I really like that.
Yeah, really like it's really good. It is tough. I'm not going to deny it. It's a really a hard. It's because you're, especially for the point bits of the emotional journey, the internal journey, having to articulate that to yourself in a few lines is challenging. But it's the reason it's so worth it is because then when you come to either write the scene or revise the scene, it's right there. You know exactly what you're trying to say. You've done that hard work. And a number of times when I've sat down to start writing a new scene or to revise a scene, and I've thought, oh gosh, right, okay, what happens in this again? And why am I telling it? And then I go to my inside outline and it's right there. I don't have to think about it. I just get to write the scene. It's so good.
So when you do coaching, kind of describe your process.
So so thanks for asking. Yeah, I work with students one-on-one. I really like the intimate relationship that you get to build with somebody. And I work with students for 12 months. Yeah, and it can seem quite daunting. I think a lot of people have that response, but I know for myself that that's at least as long as it takes to write a first draft. We need that time or even longer to really finish that draft, because there are times when life gets in the way, and there's just, if you've got a job and you've got kids and all the things that life brings, it does get in the way from time to time, and you need a bit of a buffer. There's also those times when you're just struggling with the words themselves and you've lost that flow for a bit, and it can take a week or two to find it again. So we need that. So I do work on a lot of the character stuff beforehand. We look at, okay, why are you telling this story now? So the story behind the story, what's led your character up to this point? to the point that this is where you're going to start. This is why you're starting page one, where it's starting. And when we understand that, then that really helps to kind of project the story forward and understand what it is that they're trying to achieve by the end of this novel. What is the flaw? We talk, there's all that talk about the flaw. So what is going on inside of them? How do they see the world, and why is that? In what way is that not serving them?
Right.
What do they need to change about that? And so there's a lot of discussion around that as well. And then what I love too about, then I get to see all the words. I get to see the words on the page as they write the scenes, or revising scenes if they've come to me with an existing first draft. And we chat about that. We brainstorm things. We talk about what's going on for the character. Does their motivation fit with the action that they're taking?
Mm-hmm.
Has someone kind of tried to squeeze something in because they like the idea rather than it actually fitting the story that they're telling?
Right.
So
That happens a bit.
yeah, I think we're all guilty
Especially
of
with
doing that.
first time authors. I want to say this and I'm going to fit it in no matter what. Shoehorn. um do you then, as they're writing their novel, I guess y'all have discussions at the beginning, and depending on where they're starting from, whether they're just starting from a blank page or starting with something that they've already worked on, do they usually come to you with a full manuscript, or do they usually come with you with an idea?
It's usually, because I work with first time novelists exclusively, um I'm seen as the last resort for them, because
I
they don't
see.
yet understand, just the value of working with somebody. There's
Oh,
still that
yes.
misconception that you've got to be able to do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so often they are maybe halfway through, three-quarters of the way through, and have hit a brick wall, and they don't know, they know they're doing something wrong, but they don't know what it is. They believe in the story. This is the one that has stuck with them. This is the one that they feel, this is going to be
Compelled
my first novel.
to
Yeah.
write. Mm-hmm.
So now they've come to me and they're like, okay, I've got this far. Now I'm stuck. What do I do next? And often, yeah, it's about going back to that character and figuring them out in better detail.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're doing that, I do encourage the writer to keep writing forward, so that they get to the end of that, and then we get to go back to the beginning and really, really start shaping stuff.
So it sounds like a
And
book therapy almost, right?
it's funny, there is, I love that. Well, maybe I'll take that. Maybe that'll be my tagline, the book therapist. Love that.
I
You write that down.
do.
Um,
That's great. Okay.
um, but it's funny you say that though, because there is a degree of therapy that goes on in the coaching space, and I don't know if you have this with your editing as well, but
Oh,
um,
yes, definitely.
the reason somebody is the reason this is the story that's stuck with that writer is because it's touched them in some way.
Correct.
It's there's a personal connection. They don't realize it at the time.
Most of the time. Yeah, right.
Hmm. And it's only when you start digging down that we understand, oh, because this happened to you and this has affected you and you remember this, and this is where this idea, the seed, has ultimately come from, or why it's so appealing. And
Mm-hmm.
so it can get quite emotional from time to time, especially if it's, wounds from childhood or something, relationships with parents and
Oh,
siblings,
yes.
and just having that realization that, oh my God, I didn't know I was writing about my father or my sister, or, and so
They-
there is a degree of therapy that's involved, and people are able to kind of let go of things now that they've written about it.
right. Kind of puts I feel a great responsibility to my clients to, figure out why this is so important to them and
Mhm.
how they can communicate it through their story without it necessarily being about them, because most of the time I'm not a memoir author. I'll leave that up to Valerie Isan, but but I feel like a lot of things are autobiographical. Autobi
Graphical, yeah.
Thank you. Graphical. There we go. Oh my goodness, the word just escaped me. But I I think that there is a lot of um well, obviously you're tied up in your book. And you're right. There is a compelling reason that you're writing it. usually that first
hmm
time, unless you're doing it purely for, can I make this a commercial success? There's that
hmm
too. But most of the time, the first time author is actually trying to get something off their heart. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's a great way to connect to other people who have similar things on their hearts. So
hmm
it's a good reason to write a book, I think.
hmm It
Because
is.
you're
It's
going to find somebody
bizarrely
to connect to.
therapeutic, isn't it? Even when it's fiction, it's incredibly therapeutic.
So do you find that you're a kind of an accountability partner as well?
Yes, 100%. So at the end of each call together, then we set a date for the next time, and for a date for them to send me their next pages.
Oh, cool.
And people can give me up to 7,000 words each month that I go through and make inline comments on, as well as, just questions and comments around. So it's very in depth. It's very high touch. It's very, very personalized, and each session is not like the last one. Each one is different, and I might both of us might come to a call thinking, oh, we're just going to be talking about the words on the page today, but then oof, you just don't know what is going to come out of whatever's going on in the writer's mind and life at that time, and what
Right.
they've been thinking about and what they've been writing. And so it's very, very different each time, and it's wonderful when you see in your student, in that writer, just an aha moment that they have, either about themselves or about the book or how it's connected, and you see that excitement, and they can't wait to get back and start writing again.
So do
And
y'all record those sessions?
I do, yeah. We record the sessions, and I send each writer the recording, so they've got it for as long as they need it to come back. And because often, you might be the best note taker in the world, but a lot can get lost in the moment, as we're
Right.
chatting away, and maybe things get we're both talking, and it's very exciting. So it's good to have that video to come back to and just replay certain sections just to remind yourself.
Well, if you're
Because
busy
sometimes
taking
as
notes, you
well,
kind of miss stuff.
yeah. And often when I ask like an author a question about why did the character do this, or why are they feeling that, or how are they feeling in that moment, and then they can verbalize it really, really easily, but they can't put it on the page as easily. So then it's great. Okay, we'll come back to this minute, and
Hmm.
that's exactly what you want to put on the page. Because you're
Fantastic.
working. It's really
Fantastic.
useful.
So we're reaching kind of the end of our time here. I would like to make sure people know where to find you and how to contact you and all that stuff. And um, I mean, I met you through your summit at the beginning of the year. Are you planning to do that again?
Yes, actually, just today I was having my meeting with my VA, and we've just discussed how we're going to start outreaching and start putting that together. So that will, all being well, will be January in 2023. I can't believe I'm thinking that
2023?
far ahead. But yeah, no, I love doing these
Fantastic.
online. Yeah,
Okay.
the interview series are great fun.
Okay.
Um,
And what do you call that?
It's called Be a Bestseller
Be a bestseller?
4.0. This one is going to be. I haven't got my tagline yet. I'll need to come up with that.
Right.
Um,
That's what this
but
meeting
yeah.
is for, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'm a book therapist. Love it. Um,
That's
so that
awesome.
we're working on that. But actually, as of this week, I do have I'm part of a promotion actually this week. So if you are interested in, if you're just needing it's the back to school bundle for writers, it's
Right.
called.
Hmm.
So if you're looking for a little bit of, just motivation to get back into the swing of things after the summer holidays, then I'm part of this promotion where you can pick up lots of freebies
Oh, yes.
in different ways. So you can get that at emmadesi.com/21 days.
Okay.
And is that right? Yes, 21 days, and that'll take you through to this a landing page where you can have a look and see what's on offer and pick and choose whatever that you would like to get. And it's not just me, there's lots of authors contributing as well, so there's
Okay.
guaranteed to be something
So
for
like
some of you.
two 1 days,
2-1, yes,
two
21
one
days.
days. Okay.
Yeah,
And you're Emma Desi, Dhesi,
that's
all
right,
one string
emmadesi.com.
dot
Yes,
com. Okay.
yeah,
I
I'll
just
give you
want to
the
make
link to
that
that.
clear. And they can also find your coaching there at
Yeah, there's
emmadesi.com.
Yeah, there's details about that. But probably if you're interested in that, then the easiest thing to do is just drop me an email at emma@emmadesi.com. It's a highly personalized service. And as such, it's not a good fit for everybody. So I do like to have a call with people, just to check where they're at in their writing and whether
Right.
we'd be a good fit, because it's
Good fit.
12 months. We want to
Right.
know we can get on.
Right. That's right. That's right. Well, I think it's a fantastic service that you're providing. I think I had the benefit of someone in my life that we were both trying to finish a book. Um, she had actually already published two. And so she was my mentor. And I was responsible for turning over, I think it was 2,500 words a week. That really put that really put the screws on me to get it done. And
Mhm.
sure, I had to revise it and everything, but to get that input every week and to have that accountability every week was very instrumental in getting me to the end of my first book. So
Mhm.
I had somebody in my life, but a lot of writers are just, they don't know where to go.
Mhm.
And I think that your service is obviously a highly valuable one. And I hope that people will contact you and kind of let you help them get over that through those
Yeah,
obstacles and break through to their first book.
absolutely. There's no we don't have to do it alone. That's the thing. And I have a coach. I work with a coach,
Mhm.
and I wouldn't be without her. It's just such a big help to have someone on your team. Mhm.
Right, right. Wow, fantastic. Well, thank you, Emma, for joining me today.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you for asking me. It's been lovely chatting with you
It's
again.
been great. Have a great day.
I will do. And you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Your first chapter is your only chance to hook a new reader, your only chance to get an agent or a publishing contract. Is your first chapter ready? Be confident. What if you had a resource to help you figure out the strengths and weaknesses of your first chapter? An objective, informative rubric to go by. Don't leave things to chance. You get one opportunity, and your first chapter needs to be irresistible. The first chapter rubric will help you identify the problem areas in your first chapter and figure out how to fix them. Get your free first chapter rubric at firstchapterrubric.com. Be ready for queries, be ready for readers, and get the results you dream about. Go to firstchapterrubric.com and get your copy today.